Hey there, everyone. My name is Sarang Sambari, and I'm the Senior Director of Industry Solutions at Synchron. And I want to welcome everyone to Synchron's LinkedIn Live event, where today we're going to be talking about how to enable your technicians and engineers in the field and set them up for success. And just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. There is a chat feature, so if you do have any questions or any comments on the discussion today, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll try to address them on the session today. And what I wanted to do first is just introduce our panel today for our session. And first up we have Aly Pinder, who is the program director of service innovation and connected products at IDC. Aly, if you wanted to give a little bit more background into your role.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Sarang, and thanks for everyone joining today. Once again, my name is Aly Pinder, and I lead IDC's research when we think about service innovation and connected products. I primarily think about how manufacturers are evolving their business to not just sell things, equipment, or products and assets, but to sell the services that are wrapped around all those pieces of equipment. There's been a true evolution of what service means for most of us on this call, and for my research over the last 15 years, where we've seen field service organizations think a little differently about the value that can be delivered. And a lot of my research talks about how a digital transformative journey can help deliver new sets of value propositions to customers. So thank you.
Excellent. And I'd like to introduce Dave Hart as well, who is the managing partner at Field Service Associates. Dave, you want to provide a little bit of background?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for inviting me in, and hi, everybody. I guess I'm the guy with the strange accent because I'm not American. I'm based in the UK. So my name's Dave Hart, managing partner of Field Service Associates. So I kind of started my career nearly 40 years ago, I'm ashamed to say, on the tools. I was a field service engineer for many years, which I thoroughly enjoyed the experience and learned an awful lot. As my father once said to me, you never get rich getting your hands dirty in this life. So I downed the tools and went into service management. And latterly in my career, I ran 1,000 engineer service organization, which was a $200 million P&L. And then I joined Service Max for 7 years, where I was executive vice president, looking after things like corporate development, customer success, customer support, and so on. And latterly, my business partner and I have built a consultancy business called Field Service Associates, where we help service organizations get the most out of their field service company in terms of helping them through the digital transformation journeys, for example. So we help a lot of differing organizations really compete with their field service organization. So thanks for having me on, Sarang.
Thanks, Dave. And look, I'll give a little bit of my background as well. So as I mentioned, I'm the Senior Director of Industry Solutions at Synchron, but I've spent the last 16 years in the field service space. I started my career, really mapping out reverse logistics networks and building different dispatch centers. And then I moved over into the software side and spent many years working at a lot of the field service companies like Salesforce and ServiceMax. But very excited to be doing this session today. I've worked with Aly and Dave for some time now, and it's great to have their expertise on our session today. And I thought what I'd do is, before we just jump into sort of the panel discussion, I've got just a couple of slides to help set the stage around technician enablement and what we're seeing in the industry. And I thought I'd start out with a bit of a stat here. So I want to explain why this number 80 is so important and relevant to the field service space. So I was at a conference earlier this year, and one of the service leaders was on stage. This was a person who was heading up service for a medical device company. And he said something that absolutely shocked me. He said, look, 80% of the time when technicians are getting stuck in the field, maybe they don't know all of the troubleshooting steps that they need to go through. Maybe there's a broken component on a machine and they don't know how to replace it, or they don't know what part to order. But 80% of the time when that's happening, techs are not looking at a service manual to get the answers that they need. And the second point that was brought up, which shocked me, because I've spent so much time in the software space, but 80% of the time they're not looking at a mobile application on their phone. 80% of the time when technicians are getting stuck in the field, they're actually calling someone for help. And there's many issues associated with that. First, it's not a great customer experience. Every service leader that I've talked to over the past couple of years has told me, look, our field service team is truly the face of our business. They're the people that are going on site. They're building trusted advisor relationships with the end customer. But if you have a scenario where you're having to call someone for help every time, it's just not a great customer experience. And I think it makes it more difficult to build that sort of trusted advisor relationship. And I think even more importantly, especially for our discussion today, it's not a great employee experience. If your techs are out in the field and they don't have the answers that they need at their fingertips and they're having to call someone or wait for a callback, it's just not a great experience for them. And I think, the pandemic has absolutely empowered the workforce. And so when you have technicians and engineers that are getting frustrated in the field and they feel like they're not always set up for success, I think it's very easy for them to move to a competitor or move to, work in a different industry. So I think it's really important to make sure that we're enabling technicians the right way. And I'll give you one additional stat. So look, all it takes is a 1 point change in your NPS score to drive a 10% change in revenue. And this was from the Harvard Business Review. So again, really important. I mean, your techs and your engineers are truly the face of your business. And so very important to make sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful in the field. And before we get into our panel discussion, I think we need to level set on just what's happened to the actual knowledge base before we go into our discussion today. And so look, Synchron talks to service leaders every day. And I think over the past couple of years, when we've asked questions like, what are you worried about over the next couple of years, or where are you looking to make investments, or what are the highest priorities within your organization? It seems like the discussion always ends up focusing on the workforce. And look, if I'm being candid, I don't think that's surprising at all. I think that a lot of service organizations today are caught in this vicious cycle where their most experienced workers, the people with 30, 40 years of experience, a lot of them are getting ready to retire, or maybe they just can't spend as much time out in the field. And at the same time, it's very difficult to attract new talented techs and engineers into your organization. I think to make matters even worse, a lot of the service leaders that I've talked to are telling me we're hiring people, we're training them for 6 months or 8 months, and then sometimes they're leaving and they're going to go work for the competition. And I think a lot of service organizations are finding it difficult to break this cycle. I talked to a service leader, this was a VP of service just a couple of months ago, that told me he's spending 4 times as much on hiring and onboarding than he's had to do in the past. So clearly something's broken here. But look, why are technicians leaving? Why are they going to work, for other organizations? And based off the research that Synchron has done, I'm finding a couple of different answers to this question. Yeah, sure. Maybe some techs and engineers are going and leaving for, higher paying jobs. I think that's going to happen in any industry. So, okay, sure, that's happening. I think other technicians have said, like I mentioned earlier, the pandemic has really empowered the workforce. And so maybe some techs are going and taking jobs in the gig economy, right? They're working for the Ubers and the DoorDashes of the world. And it's providing them a little bit more flexibility in their day. So sure, I think that's happening as well. But as we've done more and more research, I think other technicians are leaving just because they feel like they're not always set up for success in the field. And look, I'm sure we have a lot of service leaders on the call today. So I'm sure some of you are thinking, what's Sarang talking about? We have a great training and onboarding program for our organization. So look, let me just tell you a quick story that might help paint a better picture. A few weeks ago, I was at home and I was trying to install a timer on the outdoor light switch for my home. And when I opened up the electrical box, I noticed that there was no ground wire coming out of the wall. And look, I was a little bit worried. I didn't know if this was a safety issue, and I was expecting 3 wires. I only saw 2, and I didn't really know how to proceed with the installation. And so to troubleshoot this issue, I didn't look at the little paper service manual that came in the light switch box. I think I threw that out as soon as I opened up the package. Now, I wasn't going to call an electrician because, I mean, come on, I want to be self-sufficient at home. I can't have an electrician coming to my house every month for some of these simple jobs. So the first thing that I did to troubleshoot was I walked right over to my toolbox. I grabbed my phone. I opened up the YouTube app and I searched for installing a light switch timer. Within seconds, I found a number of videos that showed me how to do the installation. It even showed me how to do it with a ground wire or without a ground wire. And the best thing was all the videos were specific to the exact model light switch I was trying to install. And I tell you this story because I feel like this sort of on-demand experience is missing for many technicians in the field today. And you have to remember the workforce coming in today is used to running their lives off of their mobile phone or a tablet. So I think it's important to provide techs and engineers with the right solutions so they can be successful in their jobs. And what I'd like to do now is just reintroduce our panel. We have Aly Pinder from IDC, and we have Dave Hart and from Field Service Associates. And what I'll do is stop sharing here, and I'll bring the guys right into the discussion. All right, guys. So look, I wanted to start off with, you've heard a little bit of my background and sort of my thoughts on what's happening in the space, but look, the audience wants to hear from you. What do you see that's happening today in the field, in relation to knowledge management? What's working really well? Where are you seeing challenges? What about the technology side of this? And I'd also like you to maybe comment on, how do these sorts of solutions add a value to the end customer's experience? And maybe Aly, we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate a lot of the challenges you laid out with the workforce. When you think about, aging, retiring, a set of resources that are leaving the business for some reason, whatever reason, right? I feel like that's been happening for over a decade or 15 years. We've been talking about the retiring or graying workforce. But what I think is really, really critical and more of a challenge today is, one, the complexity of work, the impact on the customer experience for a technician to solve a problem, and then not having an available set of resources or skills that you can go tap into that's readily available, that is cost effective. I think the biggest challenge are those 3, aspects of that perfect storm, right? You can't go out and find new talent. The customer experience is more important to your business every day. And the assets and equipment are becoming more complex to fix. They're smarter. There's more wires or less wires in your case. These products are smart and connected, and they're challenging to a new worker that comes off the street. So I think one of the big opportunities that's facing manufacturers and service organizations is, how do we equip that evolving and dynamic workforce to not only solve problems differently, but also ensure they're able to engage a customer with the right experiences that deliver the right outcomes. One last challenge, and then I'll let Dave dive into his thoughts here, is recently IDC put out a series of predictions and ways in which we see organizations evolving their service business. And one area that I dove into on this talent piece is, how are we engaging the workforce to ensure they want to stay with our business? If it's tougher to find new talent, if it's more complicated for them to solve problems, you really do need to focus on retaining that talent and establishing incentive programs that will really get your workforce engaged and wanting to continue to work with your business, regardless of the storms that are happening elsewhere and disruptions that are happening elsewhere. So those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, so important, Aly, and just even, different ways of attracting the right level of talent into your business. I'm hearing, maybe we can talk about it later, I'm hearing some unique strategies within organizations. Dave, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the pressing question to start with, Sarang, is Did you manage to get the timer working? That's what everybody on this LinkedIn Live is wanting to know right now.
I think we're good with the timer.
Okay, it's good to know. I guess what was interesting for me about that story was the fact that you said you picked up your phone, you opened the YouTube app, you searched for that particular device, and you found knowledge articles on it, which were immediately related to the device that you're working on. So there was no searching around. You didn't spend 20 minutes looking for the right article. It just came up really quickly. I think that's a really important point. I guess to your wider question, I was on a call with a bunch of service leaders a few weeks ago, and at the end of the call, we said, what kind of things do you want to talk about next that's prevalent for your business right now? And there was a bunch of topics in there, generating more service revenue, moving to a servitizer. There's all of that good stuff that we've all been talking about a long time. The number one vote was, how do we hire new talent into our service business? That was the thing they wanted to talk about the most. And I think it opens up a whole Pandora's box of challenges, particularly when it comes to things like knowledge base. You mentioned that, we're perhaps of an age where searching online, first of all, wasn't always the sort of easiest option for us, in our careers early on. Certainly wasn't for me. As a service engineer, I had a technical service manual. That was my Bible. And I had a set of bulletins, which was a file sort of this thick that I had to go down to the car to try and find out if I could find any relative information. And of course, you're then left to sort of picking the phone up. But I think most people kind of hope that life with a knowledge management system is a little bit like, the movie The Matrix, where every time they wanted to learn a new skill, they had this big prong stuck into the back of the head. And it was like, download me how to fly an Apache helicopter. And 20 seconds later, these people were prevalent at it. And that's what everybody's sort of utopian position they hope for, is what a knowledge management system looks like. But of course, life's not like that. And for me, it's just a series of block and tackling in organizations to actually get a knowledge management system that works. Because if you don't do that, you're attracting talent now into your organization that's used to doing what you've just done, which is they don't necessarily have the same skill sets that boomers have that came into the workforce. These are people that maybe, did apprenticeships, all those years ago, qualified mechanical skills or electronic skills, that core background. You're getting a bunch of very, very smart sort of millennials, Gen Zs joining the organization, and they expect to have this information at their fingertips. So how do service leaders get all of that fantastic information that sits in their organization? Because I can promise you one thing, it doesn't matter where the engineer, wherever he is and whatever asset he's working, it's somebody in your organization knows the answer to that fix. And the secret is, how do you connect those two things together? And that's the secret sauce, which hopefully we'll talk about as we kind of go through this discussion today. The one sort of critical factor for me is I was looking through some Department of Labor statistics in the US, and by 2025, only 15% of the workforce will be boomers. So you have a bunch of those people leaving the workforce with, 30, 40 years worth of knowledge. And unless you find a way of getting that information out and getting it into a usable format so that the new people joining your organization get access to the information quickly, that I think is the secret sauce that perhaps we should explore as part of this conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. And look, I'll even go back. Well, you and Aly both mentioned it. I mean, just even going back to being able to attract, techs into your business, and having the right technology to be able to enable them in the field. Dave, I don't know if you remember this, but when we were at one of the other conferences earlier this year, you remember that person that was working for the water filtration company that said, look, our systems are fairly simple to work on. And, he was having a very difficult time attracting techs to come work for the business. And I think he ended up starting to hire stay-at-home moms because he said, look, they have all the personal skills. They can build a great relationship with a customer. They're free from 9 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said, look, I can use some solutions to just fill that knowledge gap, but they can truly build a great relationship with the customer. And I just thought that was like an amazing, unique path that they had gone down.
Yeah, and again, perfect. Maybe the people they're hiring don't necessarily have some of the technical skill sets, but if you get a great knowledge management system and you can lead somebody, as the YouTube example you used before, people with just common sense can work through knowledge articles and can help them get to the answer that they need. That was a company that had found a great resource, and what they needed to do now was marry that resource with a great knowledge base. And once they did that, I would imagine that their recruiting issues are over.
Absolutely, absolutely. So look, I also wanted to dive into I think it's hard for us to have a knowledge management discussion if we don't address, how do you manage like data on the back end. So I wanted to understand, I think most service leaders, most people in the service space would all agree that data is the key to success. Like if you don't have great data, then it's very hard to do a lot of things in the service space. So I want to get both of your thoughts around even moving from an unstructured data model to structured data, going through the process of cleaning your data. And I want to understand your perspective on just this whole data journey, because I feel like this is what you need to do first before you even start thinking about knowledge solutions. Now, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, another great question, and I think I'm going to piggyback off of what Dave laid out earlier, where he said at some point someone in your organization has that answer to any problem that comes up, right? But unfortunately, that answer is probably in an unstructured brain of someone who hasn't disseminated that knowledge to other people within the business, or we don't even know that that person knows that answer, right? So I think one of the key areas that we're seeing companies think about is how they can validate, tag, make data searchable and dynamic, going back to the opportunity to enable relevance to insights and the on-demand nature. When you, Sarang, looked up YouTube to find the answer, it didn't make sense for you to have 1,000 videos. You just needed the one video, and maybe even you needed to go to that 15-second part of the clip that gave you the right answer to solve the problem. And I think one of the ways in which we see organizations begin to think about data is how can we ensure that we know what the asset is, we know the problem, hopefully, and we can, provide that right person with the exact nugget of information and insight when they're at the point of service. How can we enable that type of experience so you're not going through a manual like Dave alluded to? I mean, when I started my career, I know I look fairly young, but in a lot of ways, it was let's go into an actual library, right, and let's sift through an entire manual to figure out what's the problem. I was watching a clip on a social media site, and they were alluding to the fact that this generation has never seen a yellow pages before, right? If you look at your business through the lens of the next wave of workers are coming in and they've never even looked at a yellow pages or a manual, can you provide them with the right insights at the right point of need to solve the right problem? I think is the opportunity for organizations from a data perspective moving forward.
Oh man, Aly, yellow pages. That's like before my time. All right. Yeah, we're going back to that. Like some of the comments that you made, I like from my perspective, I think one of the biggest issues is that a lot of knowledge base information is just unstructured data, right? So whether that's a service manual, whether that's work order data, there's not a whole lot of structure to it. So I think first you need to go through a cleaning process, and then you need to figure out a way of how do I align sort of problems with solutions. And then you're not stopping there. Now you need to figure out, how do I add context to that data? Is it a picture? Is it an exploded view of an assembly? Is it a how-to video? Because every tech that I've worked with, they're all visual learners, right? So, is it better to give them 10 pages of information, or can I give them, 5 pictures? And is that a better process for them? Dave, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting subject when you talk about data. I mean, in a previous company, we did a lot of implementations with field service organizations. I've never met one yet that says, "Hey, our data's wonderful. We're in great shape. and it should be an absolute easy job for you guys. None of them say it. Everyone to a T says the same thing. Our data sucks. We've done multiple acquisitions and mergers over the years. We've got disparate systems everywhere. So one of the questions I always ask organizations is, who owns the data? Who owns it in your organization? And the problem is, if you put a bunch of people in the room and ask that question, you get a bunch of people pointing at each other across the room. Because the thing is, everybody's like, so there's a great, and forgive my saying here, but I actually read this the other day, and it really made me laugh. And somebody said, data cleansing is like teenage sex. Everybody talks about it. Nobody really knows how to do it. And everybody thinks everybody else is doing it. And it's so true when you think about, the state organizations find yourself in. So if you're really going to put a knowledge managed system together, and as Ali pointed out, if you want to make that information relative to the person that's searching for it, so it's easy to find and it absolutely hones in to the information that they need at that precise moment in time, then you've got to get your data in really good order. And a lot of companies just seem to suck at it. And for me, one of the key questions organizations need to ask themselves is, who owns that data and who's going to take responsibility for it? And I'll give you a really good example of that. Happened to me many years ago in my career. I started a new role with an organization, and I turned around to my team and I said, okay, I need to understand how many of this particular type of machine we have in the field. So how many are out there? What is the population? And after about 3 weeks, my team still hadn't come back with an answer. And it was like, guys, it's a really straightforward question. Give me the answer. And they said, well, the problem is, Dave, that each country that operates within this operating company has used a different naming convention for the same asset. So unfortunately, we're really struggling to actually give you an answer to what I consider was a very simple question. So that whole data management tree and sorting out companies' data is something that really has to be taken at a high level in an organization, and people have to be really serious about cleaning it up, because if you put a lot of bad data in, that those knowledge management systems are just going to give you a bunch of bad data out, and nobody can afford to have that happen to them.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this too, when we were on the call last week, Ali, you had brought up a really important point about just like maturity, data maturity within an organization, and even within different business units within an organization. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think that's important as well. Otherwise, you're going to get too far ahead of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, Dave mentioned that, some of the businesses he works with have grown up through acquisitions, and a lot of the service organizations I talk to, have been cobbled together with a different set of data systems across their businesses, and they haven't quite rationalized all of those great enterprise applications, right? You even have in some regions companies that are still leveraging homegrown solutions and haven't quite made that migration to whether it be the cloud or a full-on best-of-breed solution. And each of those teams still need to talk to each other. You still need to solve problems for customers at the speed of service, right? And so when you think about the maturity of an organization, it's not within a silo or within this clean room where everyone's on the same page with a fully connected environment that you have Wi-Fi and 5G and everyone's at the same starting point. I think across organizations we see companies working with different sets of building blocks that all need to be cobbled together to deliver a single outcome for the user, being the technician.
Yeah, 100%. So guys, look, have you ever talked to a service organization or any business that's said, look, we've eliminated all the disparate systems. We're just working off of one platform, and our data is all together, right? Anybody hear anything like that before?
I've known of a couple of companies that have embarked on this journey many years ago, and maybe gone to a single ERP and a single CRM platform, but even that has got inherent problems with it anyway. And often these projects are put on a very tight timescale to deliver. So again, data cleansing is one of those things that tends to lose out, because all it does is elongate a project. So sometimes they start off with the best intentions, but at the end of the project, they haven't really got what they hoped they were going to get. I mean, data is a massive problem in any organization. I've never met a company yet that just doesn't battle with this every single day. And to the point you made earlier on, this is a fundamental issue for organizations. Organizations need to take a grip of data because, there's an old adage in life, right? You can't build a skyscraper on a bed of sand. If you do, the higher up you go, the more those foundations crumble. And as you try and pile on to any systems that you build, whether that be knowledge management or anything else, as you add pressure to that and build more and more layers into the system, effectively, the base of it just crumbles away. And, nobody can afford to do that.
And the volume of data is growing, right? And so,
Yeah.
within our research, we're finding, if I look at today, about 44% of equipment's connected with a unique IP address providing with real-time asset data. That number is, expected to grow to nearly 2/3 based off of our sample. That leap in 3 years is massive. And it's going to cause, to Dave, your point earlier, a lot of noise, right? How do we make the right decisions with an ever growing amount of data that we now have to sift through? You're going back to the days of that big manual, not that one clip on YouTube that you found.
So look, I want to pull back the layers on this a little bit further because, anytime you have these sort of data discussions, we talk about, disparate systems, just too much data. We don't have actionable insights. But with the organizations that you've seen that have done this the best, I mean, look, what's the path that they've taken? Like, do you combine all of your systems together? Do you try to put everything into a data lake? Because look, I feel like, just integrating all of your systems together doesn't give you the right solution. Like, maybe you don't need data from certain systems. So I think you have to be a little bit more prescriptive when you're doing this. But what are your thoughts on that? Maybe, Aly, if you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the starting point should be talking to, one, your customers, and two, your technicians, to understand what type of data do they need, what type of data do they need access to. In all the conversations with technologists, vendors, everyone says that their systems can integrate with other systems. But, if the person that's using the system doesn't find the answer the first time, they're going to work around and go someplace else for that information. They're going to call a friend, Dave, who, I know Dave knows the answer to all these problems, so I'm going to call that person, right? So I think the starting point needs to be, what do your users need to do their job better, whether it's a customer or a technician, and let's ensure that the systems are talking to each other to provide that answer.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there, Aly. For a lot of organizations, I always say start with the technician and work backwards in any organization. And what a lot of companies do is they start in the middle and they take educated guesses. And these people are not there. They're not there to deliberately trying to blow their organization. Of course they're not. But sometimes they just forget what the end experience looks like for people. I'll give you a great example. Years ago, companies used to collect things like cause and effect codes, in field service organizations. Hey, if we found out, through a very simple coding system, what happens outside in the field, maybe we can feed that back into our R&D teams and, we can build a better product. I found from my own experience, I'd go and talk to my technicians and say, how come you're not filling these codes in? So, nobody reads them. Nobody's doing anything about it. We've been reporting this problem for the last 10 years, and they still come out the factory the same way and nothing changes. So you've got to really experience what is it the technician or the user of that data is actually going to do with it. And how do you make it really simple for them? So, I don't think an organization's ever really going to clean its data up. A lot of it's historical data that nobody has the appetite for. But what you can do is start making sure that the data you're collating today is data that's in a rich format that's easy searchable. You can search. So your knowledge base needs to be able to search through, video, audio files, PowerPoint presentations, manuals. Doesn't matter how it's collected. Videos, getting engineers to take videos and having that in a format that's collated really easy to make the whole experience really, really easy for engineers. And I think if you get that element of it right, you can start to cleanse your data over time. I don't think anybody's got the appetite to say, right, let's stop the world from spinning. Let's jump into all of our disparate databases and let's clean everything up, because there just isn't the appetite in the world to do that. But you can make huge inroads going forward by making sure that you get some of these fundamentals right.
Well, Dave, I think, like you said, even bringing the technicians and engineers into sort of that evaluation process of what kind of data do we need, what kind of solutions do we need in the field, I think that's so critical. And look, I would even push that back onto a lot of the software vendors. See, like when you and I worked together in the past and I was leading a pre-sales team, I remember you always telling me, look, your pre-sales consultants need to get out in the field with the technicians. They need to see what's happening firsthand. They need to understand what the actual day-to-day experience is like. So I think that's even on the software vendors to push more and more of that sort of activity. So
Yeah.
we can
Yeah, I mean,
prioritize.
Sarang, you and I have talked about this before. Nobody's ever watched that program Undercover Boss and seen the CEO come back into the organization. Go, everything's perfect out there. Like, hey, everything we talk about in this boardroom, everything's it doesn't happen, right? We all know that. But there are some really simple things. I'll give you an example. Imagine an engineer goes into the knowledge management system. If you know who that engineer is and you know the asset that engineer is working on, then only make sure that all that's searchable for them is any knowledge on that particular asset, rather than doing a wide search on everything and then having to filter down that search afterwards. If you've got the intelligence to know where they are, because you're GIS mapping them, and if you've got the intelligence to know what asset they're working on, then do something simple. Just make it applicable to the asset they're working. There's some really basic fundamental things about how you structure your data and the data management going forward that can just make these things so much easier for people.
So if I can summarize, Dave, I mean, look, I guess your view is start simple, like do the easy stuff really well, and then look to some of the more advanced things. But you have to start simple, start small, and then expand from there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, there's the old adage, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, and it's worked, in time immemorial, right? But also, when choosing a knowledge management system, when your data isn't necessarily as good as you want it to be, then you need to look for functionality within a knowledge management center that will help you navigate around some of those things. And also, things like reporting and analytics is something that people don't really put much credence to. But who's searching? How often are they searching? What are they searching on? Are they getting good hit rates from those searches? Are they spending seconds or minutes reading that information? Do they click through and ask for more? All of that kind of information will lead you how people are actually utilizing the system. And then, of course, as you continue to morph and design and redesign the system, you can build more and more of those kind of capabilities in to make the whole end-to-end experience great for technicians. If it's easy to use, they'll use it. If it's hard to use, they won't, and they'll pick the phone up again. I don't think anybody's got the bandwidth to, the Daves of this world, as we mentioned before, they're leaving the company, right? They're getting older, they're retiring, they want to go on and do new things. So you've got to make sure there's a great saying for it. We call it REX, which is return on experience. How do you get the return as an employer of those service engineers on that 30, 40 years experience and have that for others? And the whole way you manage your data and your knowledge management system needs to be a key fundamental of how you design your service organization moving forward in terms of its priorities.
Yeah, 100%. So guys, what about, I just like to look at the job overall today and see like the day-to-day activity for a tech or engineer. How has that changed from, today versus maybe, 10, 15 years ago? Like, do you find like it's harder to, enable techs? It seems like some of the machines are getting more simple to be able to service, but I feel like the enablement side of things has become more difficult. So, I mean, what are you seeing? How has the job just changed overall, and is it harder, easier to get people up and running and successful in the field? Aly, thoughts on that?
Sure. And I'll go back to the analogy used where, the water filtration company decided to tap into a new source of talent that historically that wasn't going to be the people turning the wrenches, right? I think the evolution of the workforce is now much more suited to, can we deliver both resolution, but the experience that our customers expect? All of us have visibility into when something is going to break, and then when I will receive the resolution, right? I'll receive my pizza at this time. I'll get the, my Amazon delivery at this time based off of seeing it on each of the steps across the path. are we bringing into the workforce organizational people that will take the data and then deliver value to an end customer based off of that data and that insight? And I'm doing some research right now where I'm trying to figure out, historically our metrics were tied to operational efficiency. Let's think about productivity. Let's turn, as opposed to 3 wrenches or resolve 3 issues today, let's resolve 4 tomorrow. But I'm starting to see companies start to say, when you get on site, we'll connect data across CRM and other enterprise applications. So, the customer you're walking into is coming up for renewal very soon. So don't just get in there and resolve the issue. Definitely fix the problem, but maybe stick around a little bit longer to understand what else is going on with that customer so that we can ensure that last touch point that we have with you is a valuable experience that may have taken a little bit longer, but it's going to deliver a different set of value to that customer that may decide to now renew and stay with us a little bit longer. So I think the workforce is starting to be expected to do different types of activities while they're on site, not just close a work order, down the checklist, get the signature and move on, right? Now we're trying to figure out, can you get in there and see there's other equipment that may be competitive, but, that's not working over there. So I can't necessarily go fix it today. I don't want to get you out of warranty, but let's have a conversation about why that service company is not fixing that asset for you. And maybe we can add that to the next contract.
So it seems like from your perspective, the role of a tech or an engineer has expanded significantly, right? They're not just the person now going on site and fixing or maintaining something, right? They're becoming that advisor for a customer and making recommendations and providing other sorts of thought leadership.
But back to the knowledge piece, right? If I know the profile of the technician that's going on site, and I know if they are someone who can have that type of conversation with the customer, I'm going to schedule that technician to go to that customer that's going to expire very soon or having bad relationships, right? You can segment which resources you send where based on not just skills when you think about wrench turning, but skills based off of customer centricity and value creation. I don't want to send a technician that's not good at talking to people when that client's getting ready to come up for a renewal. I want to send a technician that, one, can solve the problem, but also can have that right conversation.
Wow, that's an amazing point, Aly. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, 100%. If it's someone who doesn't have sort of the people skills, maybe you're sending them at night. Somebody who's a great relationship builder. You want to send them on site when the customer is going to be there and they can have a conversation. Dave, and I know you're really big on that as well, like expanding the role of the tech. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's changed an awful lot. My memory is just about good enough to remember when I used to do it. You could hide a lot as a technician when I was a tech in the early days because none of it was systemized. You weren't GIS mapped. You could almost tell your planning office wherever you were, and they would have no idea. And look, the roles morphed completely. I think, a lot of people hired for skills. Technical skills and not necessarily the relationship skills. An awful lot of organizations now, sell products through the web or, through channel partners and so on. The only face of your brand is the field service engineer. So having a field service engineer that's highly motivated, highly trained, has great access to knowledge. Aly, you make a great point. Imagine not only getting the technical skills of that engineer embedded into your system, but some of the soft skills. We did some research, and 20% of service engineers are extremely adept at selling, cross-selling, and upselling. They love doing it. They don't see it as a salesperson's job or not their job. They are very comfortable talking to clients and can easily lead a conversation about, like I say, upselling or cross-selling another product. 60% of engineers will do it, but they have to kind of be pushed a little bit into doing it, and 20% just don't want to do it at all. And I don't think organizations can afford to do that anymore. So when you look at what you're asking of engineers these days, the ability for the engineer to, we use the term up periscope, which is to, lift the heads up and start looking around about what's happening at that customer side. Do they have a competitor asset there, for example? Is the customer talking about potentially upgrading or looking at a different piece of equipment, and how can you engage the sales organization quickly into stopping some of those things. So, the technicians of today and tomorrow are expecting organizations to have, a big ESG, portfolio and way of operating. They expect that. They're looking for flexible working hours. They're looking for organizations that work around them and not organizations that expect them to work around the organization. So there's a huge shift, I think, going in the marketplace. And companies have to respect that if they're going to create and attract the right talent, and more importantly, keep that talent. Because once you've trained them and got them up to speed on your equipment and knowing the customers, there's a huge resource to lose. It really is. And we are seeing attrition rates in service climb. Years ago, a company I worked for many years ago, the average tenure of the engineer was 29 years in the company. You're just not seeing that anymore. People are up in sticks and moving because they want to make sure that they're fulfilled in the role that they have.
Well, I mean, okay, I think the other side of it too is it's not even just the internal workforce. That's a challenge, but I think there's a lot of great solutions on the market today to be able to address some of those issues. What do you do with the third party? Like I haven't talked to a service organization recently that isn't, maybe like 20, 30, 50% of their workforce is the third party. So if you're having all these challenges with your internal workforce, what do you do for the contractor techs? Because they're also the face of your business, right? The end customer doesn't know that this person is a contractor. They're just seeing whatever business is there, right?
Yeah, it's another true dynamic of what's happening in a field service organization, because you can never staff your organization for the peaks, and nor can you staff them for the troughs. You have to find an optimum level. And a lot of organizations, to your point now, are using the flexibility of third-party service providers. So, how do you give them access to the same kind of information that you require, but obviously take out a lot of the internal noise that can go with, collating some of that information? Engineers by nature are, going to say it as they see it. So when they're producing knowledge articles, for instance, you have to make sure that those knowledge articles are fit for consumption for third parties, because obviously you don't want to give away too much information or information that may be sensitive. But of course, the ultimate fix is for the client to fix the machine themselves, right? So again, if you're going to create knowledge articles that, for dissemination to the client, then you've got to make sure that, they're on point and fit for purpose. So yeah, there's a lot of dynamics at play here, Sarang, to your point.
Yeah, 100%.
One additional thing on the contractor piece, right? So if you think about a contractor as giving you the opportunity to meet the peaks and not, fall away on the troughs of business and service demand, a contractor has the choice to take on business with you, right? So if you're really looking at them to help you scale your business, if you make it harder for that contractor to do their job, to do the job, they're going to go to a competitor and deliver service for that person. So I think the integrated data model that allows for even a third party to have the on-demand insights to solve the problem, make it easier to do work, is going to attract them to want to do business with you.
Yeah. I'll tell you, earlier this year, Synchron has a very large customer in the medical device space that is using some of our technician enablement solutions. And earlier this year, I had an opportunity to meet with the EVP of service for this organization. And, I asked him, I said, look, from my research, only about 25% of digital transformation projects end up being successful. So I wanted to understand from his perspective, what did his organization prioritize when they were looking at some of these knowledge solutions, and how are they able to enable 20,000 technicians globally? And look, I thought that he was going to give me some sort of like strategic, overview sort of response, but he actually went into quite a bit of detail, even from a functional standpoint, as to what they prioritize. And he broke it out into three things for me. He said, the first thing that we needed, he said, like in our space, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so he didn't want his techs or engineers starting off the troubleshooting process by looking at documents. He wanted them to look at pictures, videos. He wanted them to look at an exploded view of an assembly to be able to find information that they need. That way, whatever the tech is seeing in the field, now they can see a visual image of that, and it's going to help them and guide them in the troubleshooting process. So that was his first thing. Start off with pictures or exploded views of assemblies or videos. The second thing that he said is, he said, look, I need to make sure that my knowledge base is continuously updated. And this even needs to happen in an offline mode. And he gave me this example. He said, look, if you're a tech in the construction space and maybe you're working on a bulldozer and you use the wrong part to fix the machine or you use the wrong process, okay, that's not a great scenario. Maybe it's not going to perform as well, and maybe you'll have more service issues down the line. So not a great experience. But he said in the medical device space, a lot of these things are being used in surgeries. So if you've used the wrong component or the wrong process to fix something and it fails in the middle of a surgery, now you're talking about a life and death sort of scenario. You're talking about adverse events. You're talking about opening up your organization to tons of legal liabilities. So that was the other thing that he stressed. It has to be continuously updated. And then the third thing that he mentioned to me was, he's like, look, I needed to figure out the right balance between too much security and not enough security. He said, for our organization, sometimes the engineers and the techs are even accessing like engineering information. So he needed to make sure that was secure so they didn't have an IP security breach. But he didn't want to make it more difficult for techs to be able to find the right information. Otherwise, they were just going to go back to the old process of calling someone. So he wanted to make sure that whatever solution that they moved forward with integrated with their encryption and decryption platform. And he even went into more detail. He said, look, based off of the user profile, I need to be able to determine if this person can just view a document, if they can view it and download it, if they can send it to someone, if they're allowed to print it. And that authentication process needed to happen in seconds. And I think that the whole conversation was just really interesting to me, because here's someone who is leading the entire global service organization, a very large service organization, and he could go down to specific level of detail, specific pieces of functionality that they needed within their organization. So I think that's interesting too, because it's on, not only the techs, the service managers, the service directors, but if you're leading a large global service organization, I mean, this needs to be a high priority on your list as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about AI tools that are coming out now, and I know we were talking a few weeks ago, Sarang, about ChatGPT, and you're looking at just the power of those kind of engines. Just if I said to a service leader, hire somebody with great customer skills, but not necessarily a great deal of technical skills. They have to have some technical ability for obvious reasons. But imagine if you sent them out with the very best engineer you had. Literally every single call they went on, the very best engineer stayed with this person. Do you think you'd have a very high first-time fix rate? It's like, well, yeah, of course. And if you look at where AI tools are going and great knowledge management systems, that's effectively what you have. You have an AI technician on the shoulder of that service engineer, helping them all the way through those calls. And that, some people think that that's a utopian position, but it truly isn't, because that's where the technology is heading right now.
Yeah, it's, that chat GPT thing, it's, I don't know if other people on the call have explored it. I asked it the other day, like all sorts of questions, like how do you enable a tech? I asked it, how do you run a service organization? And yeah, it was scary, some of the responses that it came back with. But yeah, Dave, interesting point to have sort of the AI, solution on your shoulder here, helping the techs in the field. Look, guys, we've talked about this throughout the call, but it seems like the hiring profile has absolutely changed over time, with more organizations maybe prioritizing soft skills. But so from your experience, when organizations are trying to hire techs and engineers, are they just throwing out all of the the schooling and like, okay, you don't need an engineering background or anything like that? Or do you feel like it needs to be a good mix of technical knowledge and soft skills?
Yeah, I'll pick that up. I think it has to be a combination of both. I don't think you can necessarily go repair a CT scanner if you've never seen one before and you have no kind of electronic or electrical background. I would imagine that could be extremely difficult. But we've talked about there are some use cases where you may be better with a lower technical knowledge, which people can pick up over time, or you could train them. But there's some of those soft skills that we talked about before, Sarang. They're very hard things to train. If you're not comfortable going to talk to a customer and having a difficult conversation with them, or talking to them about a new product or upsell, cross-sell or whatever, then those are very difficult skills to train into people. You either have those skills or you don't. You're either comfortable or you're not. Whereas I think for technical skills, it is different. So, the hiring profile, I think, is changing, and people are having to almost lower the sights from a technical capability perspective and then utilize technology to help bridge the gap. And I think that's why, you mentioned before that knowledge management systems have to be at the forefront of service leaders' minds. If they're not, they really should be, because, the evidence is compelling. People are leaving organizations and they're leaving a lot of knowledge behind, particularly when you've got assets that, have got a 30, 40-year lifespan to them, because, you're never going to get that back. So you need to hire people they have to have a base of technical skills. Of course they do. But, if you look at a lot of the people now joining the workforce, these are tech savvy people who've grown up in the internet age where, they're used to searching for things and getting answers. You used the analogy before about, with your timer as a simple example of that, but they're used to absorbing knowledge this way. So it's not alien to them. It's something they almost expect from an organization. So if you're not thinking about that, you really should do, because this new workforce is going to expect that from you.
One additional thing to add there is I think there's an opportunity as we continue to kind of allude to this next workforce that has, whether they're millennials or Gen Z, they have a different view of community, right? When I think about the field service technician of the past or even the current, that person's off on their own all day, just doing jobs in the bowels of hospitals or, off on a turbine or out in a place that doesn't have an address, right? In those opportunities, if you put someone new who is expecting to have a community, you need to provide them with the type of interaction with the rest of the organization, if that is just video or a collaboration channel or some other system that allows them to feel like they are part of a bigger organization. One additional point around kind of that hiring profile, I think an area where I see companies struggle is creating that career path for that next wave of workers that's going to come into the business. So if they just come in and say, I'm just going to do the same job for 40 years, that's not as attractive as an organization that can say, we have the tools and the career path in place to say, you'll start off here, then you'll move there, and then you can become a remote expert. Then you can work directly with customers. And we have this, opportunity to build on a relationship with the organization. I think that's something, that can build on the knowledge management capabilities, but it's something that also needs to run adjacent to that technology. A business that puts in place the right types of steps and processes to enable that community is an area where I see organizations struggle with today.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, the career pathing so important. I mean, that's important for any business, and I think more service organizations need to think about this. Guys, look, we're coming up on 2 minutes left in the session here, and it's been absolutely amazing discussion today, and I appreciate all the thoughts that you've brought to the table. As we close out here, each of you, maybe summarize maybe 2 or 3 points, like just keys to success based off all the research that you've done, based off of what you're seeing organizations do. If you had to provide advice and summarize it into maybe 2 points, what would they be for each of you? Aly, if you want to start.
Sure. I think I've alluded to this, over the past hour, but I think there's 2 things that are really important, right? It's think about technology through the lens of the users of the technology. So how are your technicians going to gain access to insights? What are the tools to your use case story around the VP of service that really thought about from the technician's perspective? What do they need to do their job? You can't just continue to throw technology over the fence and say the technician's going to use it just because we pay for it and we've done a pilot. if they don't see value in these applications, in these capabilities, they're going to just work around it and do something else. And you've wasted all of that investment you made. And you've also given them a poorer experience, which may get them to leave. I think the last piece is around data relevance, right? If you go into a situation and you have all great data, it's very clean, it's been qualified, and we've alluded to the fact that it's great data, but it's not relevant to the situation that you're in front of. It's wasted effort and wasted time, and that technician is going to spend more time to do a simple job, right? So I think ensuring that data can be relevant, if we know the reason for failure, if we know the customer site that they're going to, if we know that this technician has these sets of skills and not those sets of skills, let's only feed them the information they need to solve the problem today.
Absolutely. Dave, what about you? Maybe two things that the keys to success.
Well, I have to endorse what Aly's just said, and we've mentioned this a lot, and I don't think we could push the point any harder. Start with the engineer and work backwards. Think about the experience that engineers that are joining your workforce today, the experience they want to have. They want to socialize with colleagues. They want information that's relevant. They want it to be something they can absorb quickly. And if you want to create knowledge using your engineers, then make it really, really easy for them to do so. Unless you get those fundamentals right, I think a lot of knowledge-based projects will fall over. I really do. And I guess, start somewhere. Start now. If you say we're not going to start until our data's clean, trust me, you'll never start. That's an uphill task. So, think about all of those people leaving your organization now, and how the heck do you get that information out of their heads and into your knowledge system? You need to think about how you collect that information as soon as possible before it's too late.
Yeah, 100%, Dave. Absolutely. And yeah, I'll double down in your comment. Start today. I mean, if you're waiting for 6 months, a year, you're already behind the pack. So definitely start as soon as possible. Guys, I want to thank you so much for the discussion today. I think you've brought a lot of thought leadership to the table and given the listeners here some interesting things to take back to their organization. I want to thank everyone else on the call today for listening in to our discussion. If you do have questions around any of the Synchron technician enablement solutions, please feel free to go out to our website. There's tons of great information out there, from product overview information to thought leadership pieces. So absolutely go ahead and check that out. But again, thank you so much for the time today. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.